Welcome, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Kuhn, and this is the Gentleman Villain Podcast. Of course, joining us is the star, the host, the Gentleman Villain himself, the old rogue, and of course, the captain of the Blackpool Combat Club and the heart and soul of the Blue Bloods. Of course, Mr. Sir William Regal. How are you doing today, Mr. Regal?
I'm wonderful, thank you. So I've got a story to tell you.
No.
As always, right? So a few weeks ago, AEW was in the north of Atlanta. Well, I live in the south of Atlanta, and Dave Taylor lives. This is shows about the Blue Bloods. So Dave Taylor lives 3 miles from me. Okay, he came over here, Dave. Quick history on Dave, if you don't know anything about Dave. Dave was the traveling globe-trotting heavyweight from Britain when I was a teenager, and has been all over the world since he was 19 and never stopped, and was basically about to retire at 40 and went home, and unfortunately him and his wife had split up. And then when he was 41, I said, why don't you try and come over here? So he had a completely new career. I mean, when he was in the WWE, when he was my partner again in the mid 2000s, he was in his early 50s, and he's had an amazing. You hear all these stories about who's had an amazing life. Dave Taylor has had an amazing life. He went to so many countries. He just never not booked in another country outside of Britain. Because he was we've talked about that before, a credible wrestler that you could put on it.
Absolutely.
He's also, and like he's wrestled in front of 100,000 people in India with Dara Singh, who was a legend, more than just a legend in India, the greatest wrestler who ever lived from India, and a big Bollywood star, and he's wrestled in 12 times. He went 12 different times all over the world, everywhere. He was main eventing in Mexico when he was 20 in Arena Mexico, and he's just done everything. But most people don't know, and he's lived a hell of a life. He's also the funniest man you could ever meet, but not through being anything apart from the fact that he's either funny or he's moaning about something. But when he's moaning, he's really, really funny. So Dave plays into the Blue Bloods later on as we get into this. So we're in Atlanta for AEW, and I do you want to come, Dave? So Dave comes, and a lot of fellas there know Dave, and they all love Dave because he's Dave's what he is, and he's a incredible. He's had a lot of influence on a lot of younger talent. Dave had a school at one point not far from here, and CM Punk came there, and Chris Hero, and Ace Steel, and Claudio Castagnoli, before he even moved to America, was one of Dave's students. And so Dave's the man. He knows what he's doing. I pick him up. We go to the show. We're driving back. Dave's just making me laugh. Luckily, we'd got off I-85 and we got onto Highway 75 that leads into the town or city that I live in. And he starts on a rant about I'm a bit oblivious to the world's goings on, right? And he just starts on a rant about President Biden's son getting caught. Whatever happened, I know it's a while ago, but I had not heard of it.
Right.
But when Dave's telling it, he's just got a great way of making everything sound funny. He's talking about him lying there with it, with everything hanging out, with a crack pipe in his mouth, and I'm laughing so much there's just tears running down my eyes. Now I saw a police car on the side of the road with its lights off, but I didn't pay any attention because I've just got it set on cruise, but I never speed. I got nothing to worry about. I just but I am laughing so hard now, and then he starts on another topic and another topic, and I'm just laughing constantly, and it's to the point that I can barely breathe, and there's tears running down my eyes. Next thing, flashing lights behind me.
Oh, no.
So I get pulled over. Policeman comes to the front and he said, "Can you tell me why your car's been swerving for the last 4 miles, sir?" And I just went, "It's him." I said, "He's been," and there's still tears running at me. I'm still trying to catch my breath. And I went, "It's him." And this policeman, obviously on night duty, got no sense of humor or no, anything.
Right.
"Where have you been, sir?" I said, "I've been to Duluth." And he went, "Why have you been?" And then you've got the awkwardness of, "I don't tell anybody what I do."
Right.
"Well, I was at a wrestling show." "What were you doing there, sir?" "Well, I used to be a wrestler. Now I just work as that." As soon as I said wrestler, and on the gun, "Do you mind getting out the car, sir?"
Oh no.
So I've got pulled over because of Dave Taylor making me laugh. And I'm going, "It's it." And Dave's going, "Oh, it's me. It's me," like that, just because he can't help himself. He has no fear of anything like it. He doesn't realize this cop's got the ump now. He's got the proper ump, this cop, like, because he thinks I'm just lying to him, right? All of a sudden, he's watched somebody, he's followed somebody, and obviously I was swerving, but there wasn't a car in sight. Believe me, because there's times when I've been with Dave when he's made me laugh that much. If I've seen there's any cars, I've had to pull over. This is a regular occurrence, and whenever I'm with Dave, I could tell you a lot of stories about Dave making me laugh and nearly killing myself in a car, right? Because he makes me laugh, and anybody who knows him, you will laugh harder than I hope anybody listening to this has somebody in their life who makes you laugh as much as Dave Taylor does. Because unless people say that, and people go, "Oh, that's hilarious," and they're not even laughing,
Right.
and you just want to, like,
Right.
you have no idea.
It's the worst.
It really annoys
Yeah,
me that
it's
when
the worst.
they go,
That's
that's
right.
hilarious.
That's
You
so
have
funny.
you have no idea what hilarious is until you are bent over, gasping, thinking you're going to die. That is a regular occurrence when you're around Dave. And anybody who knows him knows that. And it's either because he's being funny or he's moaning, and when he moans, he's even funnier, right?
Right.
So I've got to get out the car. "Have you been drinking, sir?" "No." And I'm really having to bite my tongue now because I'm just finding this whole thing ridiculous, right? "No, I've been laughing, sir, at this fella, because all of a sudden there's a cop there. I've got out the car. He wasn't the biggest of fellas. I'm 6'3" and I'm a bit of a lump, you know what I mean? So, and he's looking at Dave, and his hand's on the gun, right? He's like, and once I mentioned the word wrestle, and he sees me get out the car, now all of a sudden he's like, "Oh," and his hand's really on the gun, right? And he's going, because he thinks I'm drunk. So he's going, "When did you last have a drink, sir?" And I said, I have no idea, mate. And he was going, "Are you on some medication, sir?" I said, "No." I said, "No." I said, and I couldn't help it then. I said, "You're 22 years too late for that." And I just couldn't help it. He went, "I don't think you're taking me seriously." So I'm getting, but I'm like really holding back as much as I can. But I've still got tears coming out my eyes, and I'm still giggling a bit. So he's getting the ump even more, this copper now. He's proper getting the ump with me, right? And he's got his hand on his gun. And Dave's just going, "Oh, it's me. It's me." So he's not making it any better. I'm going, "Shut up, shut up, shut up." Like, because I'm going to get shot here, right? Right. And I'm finding the whole thing ridiculous. So he's gone, "Are you sure you're not on any medication?" "No." So, and then I said, "Look, sir, I'll take whatever test you want. If you want me to stand on one leg, or, I said, I can probably do an hands." And then I'm saying, I can't help it. I'm saying stupid things as well. "Do you want me to do an handstand or something for it?" I said, "I do a really bad cartwheel if you want." And Dave's going, "Oh yeah, so he does a rotten cartwheel," like just shouting out the car. It's not making this any better whatsoever. It's just getting worse, and this fella's getting the proper ump, right? He's on the night, he's in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. He's on the night shift. I can't imagine his life's too happy, right? He's sat there in a car, and then he ends up with us. He probably thinks he's going to get an arrest for the night. And, well, no, I'm going, "Sorry, sir." So Dave's just doing his usual thing, and I'm going, Dave, shut up. There's like, I might get popped off here. Like, but I'm still laughing. Like, I'm trying to shut him up. So this copper's looked at me and he's gone, well, I can see you're not inebriated, sir. And I'm going to let you off with a warning this time. And he said, but the final line was, and I had to bite, I really had to, because I wanted to just laugh in his face. He went, and this copper delivered it with no, like, sparkling it, no sense of humor, no nothing. Can you tell your friend to save his jokes until you're both in a safe place? And I just climbed in the car, and that was it. I'm just laughing. I said, you see the trouble you get me in constantly.
Yeah.
And he's just like, I shouldn't really say this, but Dave doesn't have the highest regard for the police. Let's put it that way. So, and neither of us, I shouldn't really say that either, but when we were younger, we were both up to a few things when we were in Britain.
I know what you mean, sir.
Right.
I know what you mean.
Right. I'm going to leave it at that. Right. We were both.
The follies of youth sometimes leaves a lasting imprint on us.
Yes.
Left it on me as well, sir.
Yes. Right. So anyway, that's just a normal day when I'm around Dave. So and that'll lead to start us talking about the Blue Bloods, I suppose.
So Dave Taylor pretty much got a ticket for being too funny, is what you're saying. Like,
well, we didn't get a ticket.
Warning.
Yeah, he got it for being too funny.
Right.
So I might as well tell you this story. He nearly killed me on the way to my first date with AEW. So
wow.
I've get the call 2 weeks before I actually appear on that pay-per-view. I'm driving down to Atlanta. Driving from Atlanta down to Orlando. I'd been let go in January. This is the March. I'd got a few things still in Orlando because I was there so much. It was a reason, but the main reason, it was supposed to be a big secret, and I didn't want anybody to see me arriving at an airport.
Sure.
So it's a 6.5 hour drive. So I'm just driving. Right. Well, I haven't told anybody because I'm of that nature where, we've gone through this before. I live still in the protecting the strength of the job.
Strength of the business. Yes, sir.
Right. So I was told that this, don't turn up until 7 o'clock because that's when the fans will mostly be. And there was actual few that saw me, but it never got out, thankfully, and so when I turned up, it was a surprise. I'm driving in the outside lane. Let me just put it as I was doing 78 miles an hour, 77 miles an hour. I believe that's the correct term, isn't it? Because you're allowed to do 10% more.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So
yeah.
I was only doing, just in case there are any law enforcement listening, I was only doing 77 miles an hour.
Right.
I was being a good boy. That's not the truth, but I was going in the outside lane.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the phone goes and it's plugged into the motor. Right, it's plugged into the car, and it's Dave. Well, I can't even Dave. I'm not telling him where I'm going. Because Dave wouldn't mean it, but he might tell. You never know. I just don't. Nobody knows, right? I'm just going.
It's kind of a situation where you can't even risk telling your bestest of friends.
Right. So I'm going, and there's no hello or anything when Dave calls. It's just, well, I have to put Dave's accent on. Well, he's got a sister-in-law who he doesn't like. I can tell this story because I know he's never going to listen to this, and I know his sister-in-law's not, but...
Yes, so go crazy.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Well, the sister-in-law, and this unfortunate lady, he doesn't have the most time for her, but she... How can I put it? There's no polite way of putting it. She had some problems a few years ago, and she's ended up with a colostomy bag. Right. So he went, the sister-in-law with a colostomy bag? And I went, yes. And I'm driving in the outside lane. But I'm not like, it's just, that's the first thing out of his mouth. There's no hello. you know, the sister-in-law with a colostomy bag. I went,
That's
yeah.
that's how he starts the conversation.
That's how he starts a conversation.
Hello.
And I went, yes. And he went, she's just had a new knee put in, meaning a knee replacement. I went, all right. He went, that's her with everything going for her, dragging a shit bag with a limp. And I started laughing that much. I had to get over 3 lanes and pull into the hard shoulder because I was gasping for air and there was tears. And he's just carrying on telling me this, just going off this rant
Right.
about his sister-in-law. But he nearly killed me. I had to like literally swerve across 3 lanes because I couldn't see in front of me. I was laughing that hard and gasping for air and got into the hard shoulder. That's a normal day with Dave, or being around Dave. Yeah. So I really hope all of you listening to this have somebody in your life who truly, there's a difference between laughter and the kind of laughter that makes you feel like you want to die. Well, sometimes it can be too much, but that's anybody who's been around Dave. That's what he's like. Unfortunately, he was never that. He was one of those people that couldn't really pull that off on TV as well. If you could have ever just filmed Dave and just got that out of him, it was magic. But one day, hopefully, somebody does, because he's a treasure when it comes to being in a different world of being funny. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that. I believe I've heard more than one person. I may have heard you talk about this on a different podcast about Brad Armstrong being one of the just the personality.
Funny.
What is it that enables some people are chill in the background and are chill backstage, but can perform. Other people can just be an amped up version of themselves. But then you have these people that have all this personality and they're not really red light people. What advice would you give to a young wrestler who is just this great engaging personality backstage and was having trouble turning it on when the light went on?
I don't know if it's so much. Right, let me backtrack here. It's the same with Brad, and it's the same with Dave. I don't know, and Claudio suffered a little bit with that. But as we saw a few days ago, that's not the case. I don't know if it's that they were ever put in a position to show that.
Right.
That is really what it is, because it's not that they're not red light people. If they're not put in a position to do that, because you're a talent, but the people running whatever company you work for have only got so much headspace for so many things, and all it takes is one thing in your mind to go, oh, they're whatever they are, right. And then you maybe get lumped in with.
You get put in a box.
Yeah.
And then you put yourself in a box, maybe, right?
Yes, because I've seen Brad and I've done stuff with Dave where it was at different times when he could come alive. But if you're not put in that position, how do you know? And Claudio being the person at the moment, Claudio speaks 5 languages. He's incredibly funny and has got a ton, absolutely ton of personality. But if for some reason you just don't get the chance with the camera on you to do that, you get sort of lost a little bit there. But I don't. 3 people I've just mentioned there, and Brad was a people. It becomes these myths, right? We've talked about that before. Yes. It takes one person to say it, or a couple of people, and then it becomes reality. Well, it's not reality. You can't be that entertaining and funny and then not be that on camera.
Right.
It's just you're not being given the right opportunity or the right situation hasn't arisen where you can do that.
And the right opportunity to practice to get better at it, right? Because
it's not sometimes practice or just having, sometimes, maybe that's it. With younger talent, it's practice and finding what works for you. You've got to. Okay, while we're on this subject, lesson for today.
Sure.
Quick promo thing. So I was talking to a group of people the other day that asked me about promos. I've we can go into this for for a long time, but a quick thing today. The first major thing you have to do when you start doing promos is to find your voice. We're talking about the Blue Bloods today. When I first started doing Lord Stephen Regal, if I see any of the promos now, I cringe because I was trying to put on this accent that wasn't mine and add all these scenarios, and I was overdoing certain things. And now there's no, I just switch in and out of whatever, and I still put on certainly a far more well-educated accent than I actually have in real life
Okay.
as William Regal.
Right.
But it's
All right.
just so people can understand me, and sometimes it's because it adds to the effect. People asked me years ago, they still bring it up. Why did I used to say you manga? Well, I knew exactly what I was doing. I said it so you'd remember it.
Right.
Because if you're English, if you look at that, it's the way we pronounce it. I say Tuesday, not Tuesday. So you is you to me.
Right.
Tuesday. So when I saw it written down, I just said it in my mind, you manga. So I said it as you manga, and then people, yes, because I want to say it differently because I need to stand out. I haven't got two heads. I need to stand out. So
Right.
finding that takes a long time to find your voice, or sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people are natural talkers. Americans are far better off than a lot of us British people because from being at school, you're all getting up, pledging the allegiance and having to do things at school. It's different now in England, I think. And I noticed a big shift as a talent scout. I noticed a big shift because all the British people, not all of them, but a lot of them, when I was seeing them 10 and more years ago, all of a sudden they were all far better talkers than from my day. What in my personal time, my age, your parents spent the first 2 years of your life teaching you to walk and talk, and the rest of your life telling you to sit down and shut up. And at school, the only time you were allowed to talk, you had to put your hand up, and if the teacher went talk, then it just wasn't a thing that, especially from, if you're working class English person, because as a blue collar, as you Americans call it, so it wasn't a natural thing for me to do. We're not that kind of. It wasn't then.
Right.
Different. I've noticed, from the likes when I first met Wade Barrett and Seamus and Drew Mack. Well, Drew wasn't. Drew was very quiet at first, but he found his voice. That's what this is all leading to. You've got to find your voice. I don't know if it's the same anymore. You'll know this, Matt. Remember when we were younger, when you would have cassettes and you would, the first time you ever tape yourself, and then you hear yourself and you go, "Ooh,
right.
do I
What is
sound
that?
like that?" Yeah.
What is that? Ugh.
Right. So your perfect example. We've talked about this before. You've got a wonderful radio voice.
Thank you, sir.
Right. But you've got whatever it is, whether you've naturally come upon that or you've worked on that, it sounds it's perfect for doing this, right? You haven't got a strange voice, so you've got to find your voice. So number one tip: all you can learn something, you can learn a poem, you can just say words. If it's nothing but else, that the simplest way to find your voice is to just say the alphabet. That's the first thing off the top of my head, so that you can say it comfortably and then film it. Do it. Obviously, I think we've talked about, if we haven't, promo any young wrestlers listening or anybody who wants to try to, after if you need a skill of talking in front of people and it's not natural for you, you brush your teeth twice a day, I hope. And if you're not, you dirty, scruffy swines. But anyway, you've got a mirror in front of you, right?
Right.
Twice a day.
At least.
At least. Put 10 minutes aside and practice your promos. If you're not, you're cutting your legs off as a wrestler. And that's just, when I say wrestler, that could be anything where you need to be, to have to talk, right? Put 10 minutes aside. Nowadays, you have no excuse because everybody can film themselves on the phone. Okay? And you can do it with nobody there. So sometimes it's an embarrassment problem, or you're frightened of making a fool of yourself. If there's nobody there and there's only you seeing it, how can you make a fool of yourself?
Right.
So doing it in front of a mirror is one thing. That was something that I had to work on, and I do it all the time. I'm constantly, because I have to keep it. This is not a natural thing for me. We've talked about this before. It's not natural for me to do. But all young wrestlers should know that you need to be able to communicate in some form and do a good job of it if you want to get noticed, right? Keep this for another subject, because this is a whole topic. But first things first, find your voice where you're comfortable talking. And that you may find your voice and then it will develop over time. But it's that initial finding your voice where you feel comfortable. You find a comfortable tone of where you can talk. Again, the beginning of Lord Stephen, once I've found that character voice, at the time I thought that was okay. Now I don't. But I was okay with it, and then it evolved.
Right. Years of experience and years of practice and we just heard
nonstop.
We just heard that William Regal, everybody just talks about how great you are on mic, and everybody talks about what a compelling character you are. And every day you're still working on your promos.
To the point, and if I've said this before, there's a lot of people hear the same things, and you'll hear the same things from me all the time, but I want them to stay in let's stay in there. My wife of 35 years, nearly 36, and we've been together 37 years this year. Was it 37?
Well, yeah. God bless her, huh?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just unbelievable that she's put up with me. I mean, really, she should be getting like knighted from the Queen and stuff for having to put up with me. Because especially now, I'm back to where I'm having to try to talk. I think we've talked on this podcast about I have a bit of a lip problem.
Right.
I have no feeling. Yeah. Right. And so I'm back out. And the last 10 years of my career, I was just delivering messages, and I just reacted. And a lot of times I do just react, but I've still got to be able to go. And sometimes you can hear me if you listen to me doing commentary, I get caught up on once I start going fast. So I'm having to sharpen myself back up and re-get everything going, because it's just become, again, I don't think I stagnated, but it just became something I could do, and people just expect me to be able to talk.
Right.
Well, I don't think I'm never satisfied with that. I've got to be on my game. Okay. So it's got to the point where, and it's been like this since I went 19. Okay. Have I told this story before about how I started to talk?
I'm not sure you have. I don't think.
Okay, so when I was 19, I wrestled an American wrestler called Irish Pat Barrett, who was the WWF Tag Team Champions at one point. He got left a huge amount of property in London, became a very wealthy man very quickly, moved over to England for a while, and to put all his affairs in order. And he did some shows for All Star Wrestling, who I was working for at the time. And I wrestled him in Worthing, England, in front of 50 people. Hastings in England, where the Battle of Hastings was. The White Rock Theatre, I believe it was. And there was 50 people in. And we came out and he went, at the time, I was starting to get bigger and heavier and whatever. He said, you'll go to America one day. He said, but none of you limeys know how to talk. He said, you need to learn how to talk. So from that moment onwards, I never stopped practicing.
Right.
And it became a thing then, and it's never changed. Everything I see, I start cutting promos on, right?
Right.
And for 5 years, I from that moment on, I was constantly everything. I was working. I was learning poems. I was learning. A huge influence in my life, Terry Rudge, who was happened to be traveling the world with it. He was a Shakespearean actor as well, in his spare time. Um, I happened to be in a lot of places with him, and so we were talking about this. So he said, "Oh, I can help you a bit with that. Let's learn some." We learned some monologues and and some Shakespeare, and it all paid off because I've used lines from all of it. And when I've got stuck, again, this is all tricks. When I was
Well, it's like
Lord
you say,
Stephen Regal,
get inspiration from things outside of
from
wrestling, right?
outside. Well, when I used to get stuck sometimes as Lord Stephen Regal, I would just start talking, just spouting Shakespeare. It didn't matter because nobody had a clue what it didn't matter. It worked perfectly with my
Right.
character. And I'd just start talking a load of nonsense, right? Just trying to get my thoughts back. Because everybody, I don't care how good you are, and I've been around and stood across the ring from the best of all time talking.
Absolutely.
I don't consider myself the best, but I can stand in there with the best and keep up with them. Not verbally sometimes, but I can react to their whatever because I've learned to do that. So I can just, like react
Right.
to whatever they're saying. So I know that is something that passed me by a long time ago. Very early on, when I was in my mid-20s, when I came to America, I learned that there's nobody. I'm not worried about ever doing a talking segment with anybody. Once I got to being Lord Stephen Regal, which was the middle of the first year I was here, because I knew I could react, even if I couldn't verbally keep up with somebody. I can just react and then find enough words to get by. So again, and I'm telling you, I was just not good. I was a shy. At school, oh god! In fact, I used to get caned at school because I couldn't read out things that I'd had to stories I used to have to write. Right. So I mean, that was just. I'm not moaning about that. It's just the truth.
The way it was.
It's the way it was. Yeah.
Right.
So if I do it so much, and my wife, it's become such a thing that it looks. This is what happens. I'm going because my mouth's moving, and I'm actually going through the scenarios as if I see something on TV, I start cutting promos on it. If I think of things, I'm cutting promos, but I'm not doing it out loud. But you can obviously see it on my lips. And my wife, Chris, after all these years, she just looks at me like like I've just dropped out of a dog's backside.
Right.
And looks at me and just says, "Say hello to him for me." Because it looks like I'm talking to myself.
Say
right.
Hello.
Yeah, that's what she just, and she did it the other day. She's just like, shakes her head and just go, "Say hello to him for me, will you?" And it's become a running gag with us because I'm constantly working on that. So what I'm getting to, I know there's always a lot of stories, but I want people to hear, you think that I was good at that? No, I wasn't. But find your voice. That's the number one thing, is you have to find your voice. It will develop over time. But if you're not comfortable talking, if you are a comfortable talker, then you're miles ahead of the game. For anybody who isn't, first of all, there's no excuse. There is absolutely no excuse for you not to be a decent talker.
Right.
It's just you're not putting the practice in. Right?
That's the way it is with most things.
Right. You are not putting the time and effort in. Twice a day, you've got that mirror in front of you. Now, there is no excuse. Our friend, Mr. Shivani, when I came to America and I was just Stephen Regal, he said to me, "Come down to the CNN Center on a Wednesday, because that's when we do all the market-specific promos." There was a couple of little rooms. He set a camera up for me, and I would stand there because my family wasn't here and it was a day off. I was never there less than 8 hours, sometimes 12, and sometimes more, every Wednesday for about 3 or 4 months. And then all of a sudden they actually had me doing, I did a few interviews for Davy Boy, because it was, as this was before I became Lord Stephen Regal. They had me actually do the talking for him because he wasn't there. I think he was injured.
Right.
But he had a show, and so they had me come out and do the with I think it was
Wow.
with Mr. Shivani.
Right.
So that I'd got very comfortable quickly talking on camera because all that practice I'd done for all those years before, I never got to do it anywhere until I came to America. Because anywhere else I went in the world, all you ever did as far as promos were press conference type of things where you would sit like boxers and UFC MMA people at a, like if I went to Africa, if I went to India, if I went to and later when I went to Japan, you just sit at with a table and with a suit on, and people would ask you questions. And
Mm-hmm.
so it wasn't the promo. I could comfortably do that. I couldn't do the promo. It's not that I couldn't do it. It just wasn't good. You can see my first ever one. It's on YouTube with Jim Ross.
That's right.
I feel very uncomfortable when I watch. I have watched that and I've gone, oh, I mean, it's okay, but it's not what it could be, within a few months because of Mr. Shivani giving me that opportunity with the camera.
Right.
Where then, because doing it in front of the mirror is one thing, then doing it when you can see it, you could go. There's no real feedback when you're doing it in front of a mirror. You're seeing yourself, but you can't judge it later.
Right.
When you're filming it, you can go, oh, I don't like the way I'm looking there. I don't like, my eyes are wandering off. I'm doing too much with my hands. I don't like the way I sound. So you can start to, if you're smart, you can start to change it.
Sure.
Nowadays, you've got your phone. You can just anywhere go into the toilet if you have to, shut the door for a minute, stick the phone on, film it, look at it. So find your voice. And if it's nothing else, just recite the alphabet until you're comfortable doing it and you look like you're comfortable and you can deliver it. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. And then when you can do that and you're just comfortable with the way you sound, then get that right. Just sounding in your normal voice as if you were just reciting the alphabet. Then every emotion that you can possibly think of, try to do the same thing. As happy as you can be, as mad as you can be, as sad as you can be, and then anything else that comes into mind. Every emotion on the verge of having a breakdown, hysterical, everything that, and again, sometimes it's just you watch a TV show and you see somebody do something, I don't know, whatever you see. We all watch different things. Oh, wow, what did they just do? Let me see if I can recreate in my voice whatever emotion they've just shown me, which might be something that you haven't thought of. Let me see if I can recite that alphabet in that thing. Watch it. If you feel comfortable, what is good, and you think, oh yeah, I think I'm pulling that off, is finding somebody that will tell you the truth. That is sometimes hard work, right? You need somebody who will go, and you don't want to even tell them what you're trying to portray. Say, what do you see when you see that? And if they say, well, you look like you're about to kick off, as if you're going to really, beat somebody up by saying, just the way you're saying the alphabet.
Right.
Right. And that's what you're trying to portray. Maybe you're starting to get there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Right. But if they say, oh, you look miserable there, and that's not what you're trying to do.
Right.
But you need somebody to tell you the truth, because unfortunately a lot of people don't. And they'll just go, oh, that's great. That's great, because they just tell you a load of nonsense.
Right. Because
people, they find it hard to just give you, it's not being, you don't want somebody who's overly critical and
no, you don't want someone to crush
about
you.
it.
Right. Yeah.
You want somebody who's just, I've found this a while. Like I came upon this idea about 10 years ago. I used to tell the extras this: find some of your friends who don't like wrestling.
That is amazing advice, for real. Yeah.
Right. Because as wrestlers, we sometimes think we're doing things. I watch it and I go, oh God, this is so, they think they're trying to act tough here, and it's just so not what they're doing, because they've never really, and it's hard in this day and age to live through real experiences. It just is.
It really is.
A lot of my
Right.
stuff, and a lot of people from my age group, we had to live through different experiences. Or some people can are just great actors and they can act. But a lot of mine is just real life. And I can kick in and out of whatever I need to be because I've gone through situations. Not nice, some of them, and sometimes just happy or whatever it may be. I can just play off it, right? I'm going to tell you now, there's one thing that I cannot do. People think I can do all kinds of things, and you've probably noticed it. I make it a joke of doing it overly the top ridiculous. I cannot do a real sounding laugh unless it's a real laugh. It's all the things that people think I can do, and I have a pretty good range of what I can do when I talk. I cannot do just like some actors or some wrestlers can just laugh. So I just have to make it the exact opposite of that with a ha 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 ha, like an over the top thing, and I somehow pull it off. I get away with it, but it's pathetic. It's not good because I can't do a real. It's one thing I've worked on it for years, 30 odd years. I've worked on that, and I still can't unless I'm really laughing, which is how we started this with those. Because I watch a lot of comedians and I see people they're not really laughing. They're just sort of going, ha ha, and and they go, he's hilarious, and I'm going, you don't know what hilarious is. Yeah. You don't know what real laughter is. It's that, just, I don't know. This is going to offend people, but I like certain British comedians. I love certain British comedians. Certain ones I just don't get. There's right. But if they're successful, who am I to? It's whoever's. I don't get Jerry Seinfeld in the slightest.
You said that you don't really get American
I don't get him.
humor.
No, I get American humor. I get Doug Stanhope. He makes me laugh.
Right.
He makes me laugh hysterically. I'm a big fan. And there's many others, right? There's Richard Pryor. I can go on and on and on and on and on, right? It's just, there's a lot of people make me laugh. I watch Jerry Seinfeld and I just go, oh. Right. I used to watch his show and I love the show and I love the characters. But when I watched him do his stand-up, I would go,
get that. Yeah.
Oh. And then I started watching Curb and then I go, oh, that's why it works, is because Larry David makes me laugh my head off.
Absolutely.
He's the funny one. He just happens to be right and now that's going to offend people. It's not. It's because it's like wrestling. It's a personal choice of what you like. If you like somebody, he doesn't do it for me. I get it. I get how good he is. There's a fella in England who's like that, one of the highest grossing comedians ever, Michael McIntyre. It's about as funny as a burning orphanage to me. I mean, I just don't find him funny at all. Nothing in the slightest makes me laugh about him. Right. Nothing. In fact, he annoys me. But I go, bravo, because he's doing well. Right, he's obviously there's enough people. He's selling out arenas, but it doesn't work for me. But it's not wrong. It's just me. I have find what's funny. Anyway, we're getting off the path there. Find your voice. Find what works. Find the people that you can. Why I say don't have wrestling people, because wrestling people are used to a certain thing, and sometimes they're used to the rubbing their hands together and thinking that's tough when I know it's not, because I know real body language. Or they're used to try. I think we spoke about this before. You only got so much time sometimes on TV or whenever you get a promo. Try to avoid, on top of doing your alphabet, and finding your voice, then finding your emotional range and what you can and can't do. And if you can't do it, work on it twice as much as the stuff you can half do. But you need you need sort of sounding board. And if if you've got a friend who is used to watching the best dramas or movies, right? Because there's nothing but like for years now, there's been where do you start? There's that many great TV shows. If you've got a friend that watches is used to watching high quality acting, and they don't like wrestling, and you can show them, you recite the alphabet, and they say, oh, that's good, that's a little tip as well, because wrestling people are used to wrestling promos. Well, you find that the best wrestling promo people, unless in this day and age, are the ones who don't do wrestling promos. Or what was considered a good wrestling promo in the 80s
Right.
isn't the same now.
Sure.
You need to sort of just communicate with your audience on a different level. That's why CM Punk is connects when he talks, because he doesn't do wrestling. He talks from the heart, and he talks with all his emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And John Moxley is the same. And there's people, and some people could come along in this day and age and do a perfect wrestling, an 80s style wrestling promo, but don't think that's going to be you.
Right.
Like you've got, if that is you, great. But if you and you come out and you're doing all what everybody has done for years, because everything evolves. So find your voice. That's a little tip if you want to work on it, because there is no excuse for not being it. Not everybody is going to be a great talker, but some people just don't try enough. There's no excuse not to be a decent one. And if nothing else, you can at least learn to just react off people instead of being stone-faced or not being able to get anything out. If you're not doing that, my friend won't mind me saying this, because we're very close friends. Most people do not know that Norman Smiley has a stutter. He has a speech impediment. Not when he does a promo, he doesn't. Now, if he can overcome that to do when he has to, what's your excuse?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
He put a lot of work into that, a hell of a lot of work. Right? So it's just these are little things. Now I'm sounding a bit like I'm getting on people here, but I am. If I do, I'm sorry if that offends you. But if you want to survive in this job, you're going to have to talk. If you want to be the next MJF, you better be able to. You want to take his spot, you better get as good as him very quickly. Right. If you want to be the next CM Punk, you better get as good as them, right? And if you're not, it's just you're not putting enough time in. Mm-hmm. But if you're starting from scratch and you're just starting out now, or if you're at that level and you're already something, one day it's going to come back to bite you if you can't keep up with the talking part of it, because that is something that you need to be able to do.
For sure. Right. And this is why I get so many DMs and little tweets from wrestlers who tell me.
It's named after me, you know that. It was invented after me.
Oh, yeah.
Darren Matthews.
Yes, sir. Yes,
but
sir.
People don't know, but it is.
And they get, I've heard so many things about how much wrestlers enjoy the show, and how veteran wrestlers have told me how young wrestlers should listen to the show. And that's the reason why. And you talk about preparation. And you talked about 5 years of working on promos. And if you want to prepare,
can I just give you the five P's?
Oh, go ahead.
This is a thing that I learned from All-Star Wrestling promoter Brian Dixon, who's a character. Let's put it that way. He's a rogue, Brian. Brian Dixon has these things that he says, and from 18, I was working for him. He's just got. He's got a. I can't do it very well. Robbie Brookside does it the best, but he has a certain way of talking. The 5 P's. The 5 P's, Darren. And what the 5 P's are: proper planning prevents piss poor performance. So the 5 P's is what you need to be working on, whether it's all your game, right?
Well, it's great you say that, because proper planning is what Carshield brings us.
Oh, here we go.
This episode is brought to you by Carshield, who makes it easy and affordable to protect my car from expensive repairs. That's just for starters. Carshield. I'm trying to figure out this video stuff here. There we go. Carshield is the #1 auto protection company in the U.S. and offers protection plans for around $100 a month. The plans cover more parts than ever before, whether your car is 5,000 miles or 150,000 miles. Let me tell you how simple it is to get your car fixed. When you need a repair, you choose the mechanic, and Carshield's administrators handle the rest. That's it. You don't have to deal with the paperwork or headaches. You're taken care of. Same goes if your car breaks down and you're stuck on the side of the road. Plans through Carshield also include coast to coast roadside assistance and maybe not assistance for driving off the road because Dave Taylor makes you laugh. I'm not sure if
Yes.
that's an option, but
No.
yeah, we can look into it maybe. And the Carshield administrators are there for you with rental car options and trip reimbursement at no extra cost too. Get coverage today and you'll lock in your price now and it will never go up. That means as long as you own your car, no matter how old it is, you're protected from the rising cost of parts and repairs for your vehicle. CarShield helps protect my wallet from expensive car repairs, and they'll do the same for you. Go to carshield.com/podcast to start your plan and lock in your pricing forever. That's carshield.com/podcast. A deductible may apply. Now, Mr. Regal, we are talking about the beginning of the Blue
The
Bloods
Blue
today.
Bloods, yes.
And
What a
it,
wonderful, what a, I've been so fortunate in my life, honestly. You know, there's people talk all this nonsense about I this and I should have been that and that. I couldn't have asked for a better, and it's still happening. I mean, everything. What an incredible charm life I've had to be a part of that. That's, you know, everything I did before I came to America was incredible. You know, even if some of the when it was I was making no money, I was doing what I wanted to do. But I've had these incredible roles with these incredible people, and the Blue Bloods was the start of the first group that I was in America, which, and it couldn't have been any better, and it couldn't have started off any better, and then it couldn't have been any better and more fun for the time that I was doing it. And now you go back to watch it, and that the actual the Blue Bloods in Hollywood video showed up the other week, which was stuff that is just unbelievable. So ask away, because do you want me to just start with how this
well,
happened?
I was going to ask. You were doing well with singles. You
Yes.
had a title. You actually had a match with Antonio Inoki at Clash of Champions
Yes.
in September. You lost your title to Johnny B. Bad at Fall Brawl,
Yep.
and in November, we start the Blue Bloods, of course, with John Paul Levesque. But
Yes.
was there a feeling that maybe, because sometimes it's like, well, maybe the single's not working out, or maybe it's just something for you to do for now because you're so young and they just want to bring you along? What do you think the reason was to take you from your singles career at the time, which you were very young, you had some success? uh was there a reason that you were told you were being put into a tag team or a group?
There's a lot of times when I look back and I realize how fortunate I was. I'm never really been anybody who's tried to force anything about my own career as far as what I was given. When I look back, that was a great, huge bonus, because I'd been the television champion for a really long time. That time goes that quick nowadays, but to be what was it, for was over a year, and then I got it back again pretty quickly from Larry Zabisco. You know, it was a long period, not quite a year, but I
And
was
it being
on
the TV championship, you were defending it
I
quite
was
a
on
bit as well.
every single
Right.
show,
Absolutely.
every single show. Well, so when you're on as a TV champion, you are on and that was at the time was WCW Saturday night, Sunday night main event, and then the worldwide shows, and there was whatever else. This was before Nitro. It's a lot of TV time, which is incredible. Incredible amount of TV time, an incredible amount of talking time, which for I was 25 when I started being the TV champion, and I wrestled the match against Ricky Steamboat. Then I got to wrestle Ricky Steamboat for months, and I just couldn't ask for any more. And wrestle some incredible people, and in that time I wrestled all kinds of stuff.
Let me ask you this real quick.
So I was pulled out. Can I just finish this train of
Go.
thought, because I'll forget it
Absolutely.
otherwise.
Absolutely.
Whoever's idea it was to take me out of that, I found that later on with Mr. McMahon. He always knew the right time, and he would tell me that. I don't know if he, everybody has the different tales. I always had a really. He always just told what was going on. I never got any problem. He just talked to me, right? It's time to finish this role before it overstays its welcome. That was what how he used to say. The
Right.
commissioner role, when I first had that, I'm like, take me out of that. And for about a split second, oh, well, this is going good. So I'd been on TV a lot, and I was starting to go backwards and forwards to Japan as well. Before the Mr. Inoki match, I'd just previously been to Japan. So I knew that I was on, for the next 3 years, I was on pretty much every other tour to New Japan. So I'd had a huge amount of TV time in a short space of time, 18 months period, or whatever it was. And Triple H had shown up at John Paul Levesque at the beginning of the year. Me and him hit it off straight away. I saw a lad, he was only a year younger than me, but he hadn't had as much wrestling experience as me. I like to train, so we were going down to the power plant, and he was training with me. He was training with Terry Taylor. He was Jody Hamilton. So we'd travel together, and it just, him doing he switched his character to this French nobleman, and me. I don't know whose idea it was to put us together. I really don't. And
you remember who presented it to you?
I can't, no. But at let me try and think the time period here. I'd finished working with Dundee, because I'd gone to Japan. This is Ric Flair had took over as the head of creative, or as the booker, as they say. I'm not a big fan of using wrestling terms, but
right.
Okay, so Ric Flair was I came back from Japan, because Dundee never used to come with me, and flew straight into Disney to do 4 days of tapings. And so I landed after I don't know, two or 3 week tour of Japan, landed in Orlando, did 12 out of 13 shows, if I remember correctly, in 4 days. But when I got there on the first day, I landed the night before, went to my room. We used to have to meet at this hotel and take buses into it was either Disney. Sometimes it was Disney MGM Studios. Sometimes it was Universal.
Right.
No, Dundee. Why I'd been away, in the few weeks I'd been away, Ric Flair had took over as the booker.
Right.
He didn't like Dundee. Arn Anderson didn't like Dundee. I didn't know anything about it. I was in Japan. Dundee was gone. So in that few weeks, Dundee was gone. That was it. He was out. So I come back. Where's Dundee? He's gone. And then it was either Arn or Rick who said to me, "Oh, it's not going to affect you in any way." And I was like, "All right." But, it didn't matter to me, because by then me and Bill were not really having a lot to do with each other.
Right.
Then that's a story for another time. But we had good chemistry on camera, but we weren't having a lot to do with each other outside of, I was traveling sometimes with, mostly with Steve Austin by then.
Well, the first match you guys had was November 26th of the same year.
Okay. So this is 94.
Right.
So
actually, I'm sorry. In November is when you began the vignettes, where you were not vignettes, but the segments where you would come out and scout.
So what we were doing,
this young man.
What we were doing were, however this came about and whatever time period would have been, we were already training together. Any day we had off, I was going to the power plant and we were training at times. I was trying to, me and Triple H hit it off. I was teaching him as much of the British style of stuff that I could. Not that he ever needed it or used it, but I felt that I knew what was happening in Britain, and there was only a few of us left that knew that style. And I wanted to at least pass it on to somebody, and he was willing to train.
Right.
I was showing him that stuff because I thought, what happens, this style is going to die out, which it nearly did. And it's still, there's people can do it, and like later on, Doug Williams sort of took it up, and Johnny Moss and people that sort of, but it
Right.
and a few people kept it going in Britain, but the last of the people that actually knew how to do it, and the last person ever was James Mason, who is a trainer for NXT UK. He was the last ever in '94. He started getting trained in that, and he was the last ever that was actually taught that style properly by the people that could do it properly.
Right.
I was in America, so I was teaching H. Paul that. Every time we had Terry Taylor was teaching other things, and me and him we just got on. At the same time, we heard that there was going to be a tag team. Well, Jody Hamilton ran the power plant.
Right.
Who better if you're going to be put in a tag team? Because I'm a British nobleman. They've decided that I need to be in something new. Whoever decided that, probably Rick. Thinking about it, was probably Rick. They decided that I needed to be in something different for a while, which is great because I'd done so many singles matches.
It shakes it up a little bit, and you've been on TV doing these singles every week,
every week,
every taping,
every match, and just everything.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody else had the TV championship. Give me something else to do. Oh, put you, now that he's changed his character, put you to a Frenchman and an Englishman together doing the noble thing. And I don't know where I have no idea who come up with the H might know. I don't know who come up with the actual term, the Blue Bloods, because they used to refer to us as the Blue Bloods, but we weren't actually called the Blue Bloods.
Right.
It was they'd refer to us as a British Blue Blood or a French Blue Blood, but we weren't actually but we were the initial thing. When we start, so we were training. Then all of a sudden, we every time we're at the power plant, we've asking Jody to teach us American tag team, because I was in a lot of tag teams in Britain,
right?
But once I started watching really good American tag team, there was a different way of doing things and a different psychology, and so who better than Jody to teach me that?
Right, Jody Hamilton, one member of the Assassins, one of the great
of the Assassins of the
tag teams of all time.
So he was doing that, and then when we were going to shows, we were asking Bobby Eaton and we were asking Arn Anderson questions.
That's
because we've talked about this before. I had all these incredible people around me.
Mm-hmm.
You know why I'm sat here now. You know, I'm 54, but when I was 25 or 24 when I came here, I had these incredible people around me that knew everything about American wrestling. You know, how to go from a period in the 80s where you had to go back weekly to towns and draw money, and how to captivate an audience and draw an audience. And so I had all this on top of the European and the worldwide experience I had. Now I could pick their brains. So we're between me and H, we're picking their brains. What the original plan was to put us together and then put Sherry Martel with us. They had big plans for us.
Wow.
They had very big plans. They had very big plans for us. Sherry had already gone out and got like those big wigs that you see in the things and the mask and the
going full on.
So gonna go full on, but she was gonna get introduced later on down the line. Well, it was a short period of time, and it was coming up towards what was the date that you said we
Well, you started scouting in November, but your debut was January 21st against the Armstrong brothers, Brad and Scott.
But we'd actually filmed. I think we'd filmed them before, because if I remember, Right.
Disney. You guys filmed everything,
Right.
like
Because
right.
if I remember rightly, now this is where I could be wrong, but this is what I remember. I'd gone home at the time, not long after we'd started actually even forming this team. And when we were doing it, Triple H's contract was coming up at the end of in at the end of the year in '94, and he'd had an offer. In fact, there was an offer floating around for both of us, um, for the from the WWF. I was under a deal to WCW for a couple of years, and they were also in the middle of getting my family and me green cards. So I was quite happy, but he asked me, I've got this offer to go to the WWF. And I said, you've got to go. And he was like, yeah, but we're about to do this. You know, he wanted to go. I know he wanted to go, but he was, you know, we'd already bonded. We had this, and they had big plans for us, right? We knew that
Right.
coming into 19, into
I mean, look at you guys, though.
1995, they had
Right.
big plans for us.
Two
So anything,
good-looking young guys with this great, just, gimmick or, characters they were born for.
yeah,
Of course, they'd have something for you. It looked like,
okay,
their plans probably got miffed a little bit
right.
with H leaving, right?
So this is where, see, I've heard different stories. This is what I know. As every year, I used to go home for Christmas. I used to go back to England for at least 2 weeks at Christmas. That's why I'm thinking everything that was filmed, that was seen after in January, was already filmed. Because, and now I could be wrong, but this is what I remember. I remember my first TV back in January was at Center Stage in Atlanta. And I get there, and I know Triple H, because he'd asked me, and I said, listen, you've got to go to the WWF. WCW had cut back on their amount of live events. Eric Bischoff was in charge, and he'd cut back because it wasn't financially viable to be doing loads of live events. They weren't
Right. The
making any
business was
money.
changing already, right?
Yes, they
Yeah.
weren't doing as
The
well.
live
I'd
events.
done it. What I knew about Triple H was he had all these incredible things going for him, but what he hadn't had was loads of reps. He needed loads of reps. That's what most people need, and it's an unfortunate thing nowadays. Very few people get loads of reps.
Right. We
But you
talked
need,
about how that's probably
yes,
gone, right?
but he needed that.
Yeah.
He needed loads of reps. So I said to him, as soon as he said it to me, I said, well, look, I can't go, because I said, but you've got to go. I wasn't worried about myself or this group going on. I knew I'd be okay, right? Um, Maybe that was overcome, but no, I knew I could do my job. I just proved to him that I just carried the TV title and done it and worked with everybody and done everything. You've got to go. You need to be working whatever they were working, 250 plus
Right.
days a year. That's what you need for the next few years to bring you up to here, right? You've already got all these incredible. You've got the look.
Attributes,
You've
right?
got
Yeah.
yeah. You need now reps
Right.
to either find out what works, what doesn't, what, because yes, we can get through this and we're like, this will be great together, but you would really benefit from reps. Okay, so I knew he was going. Now Ric Flair, I have heard tell a different story to this. I'm telling you my version.
Sure.
I came back after Christmas. My first show in this is 95 now. My first show was Center Stage. I get there and I'm sat in it's only a small place, little stands. And Rick came up to me in the afternoon and said, Where's Levesque? He's gone. And I went,
Oh no.
yeah, I know. There was always miscommunication at points.
Right.
I'll leave this for Eric and Rick to argue over, but I know there's a lot of stories I can tell you with miscommunication of not
Sure.
people not knowing what was going on, right? Rick said to me, and I remember it as plain as day, I was sat, and I know exactly, I was 4 rows up, sat in the stands. I know exactly, because I used to sit in the same seat all the time and think, I'd look at the ring and I'd think about just whatever I was going on. That was my little spot when I was in center stage in the afternoon. I sat there in my usual seat, because usually it was thinking, how am I going to get through another draw with somebody who can only do a clothesline? Which was one of the things that at the time, with some big bodybuilder who can do nothing but a clothesline. How am I going to get a 10-minute draw out of them or a 15-minute draw?
So as far as you were thinking,
that had become my spot to where I used to try and think, because I never used to talk to my opponents,
because
that went from the day. But
your tag team partner was gone, so you're probably thinking about singles again, right?
Yeah, I'm just sat there thinking, well, I've got no idea what they're going to ask me to do, but I'm just sat there. I don't think I was thinking about anything that day. I knew he'd gone, but Rick came up to me and went, "Where's Livek?" And I went, or he said he's gone, and I went, yeah, I know, because he didn't until that day. He might tell you different. He didn't know, or at least that's the way it came across to me, that he didn't find out until that particular day, which was our first day back in January of 95. And he went, "What are we going to do?" And I just looked straight across from opposite, on the exact opposite side of me, on the other side of the ring in the stands, sat Bobby Eaton. And as quick as a flash, because Bobby Eaton was one of the people I'd been talking to about how to do. Bobby and Arnold were people that I was talking to about how, as well as Jody Hamilton, showing us at the power plant how to be a
American
style tag team and make my stuff fit in with it. And, a lot of questions.
Right.
Because I was always got on with those fellas, right? Very much so. And I went, I don't know. I'm thinking, I don't know why. I think I saw the film My Fair Lady over Christmas in England, which I'd seen many times. But that's
I totally get it. Yep, I got it.
Right, because it was always on. It was always on it when I was young. So
you're seeing Bobby.
I see Bobby Eaton, and maybe I didn't see it, but that film was definitely ingrained in my head, and I don't know where so I'm thinking, for it to come that quick, I must have just seen that film, or at least seen a clip of it, because I just went straight to Rick, who's 4 rows down from me. I went, "Put me with Bobby and we'll do the My Fair Lady thing." And he went, "Yeah, that sounds good," because he obviously liked Bobby, and Bobby didn't have a spot at the time. I went, "Put me with him." And he went, "Okay, you sort it out."
Right.
And that was how we left the conversation. Now, not long after that, so I just went over and talked to Bobby, and he was happy, and we just went, "Okay, we'll just do," and that's how the thing started.
Sure.
In the meantime, they changed their mind about Sherry, and Sherry went with, I believe, Harlem Heat first, and stayed with Harlem Heat. I'm not sure if she went anywhere first, but she went with Harlem Heat, which was a brilliant. That they were an incredible grouping of people. Yeah. That chemistry that they had together was great. Sherry was fantastic, and Harlem Heat knew exactly how to do Harlem Heat, and that it became some of our opponents a lot of the time. But then the next thing, we're down in Disney again, and maybe February. It might have been earlier than that. I don't know. You'd have to look. Somebody, I'm sure, can look that up. But we were down there, and they said, "Right, can you film these vignettes?" And they they said, "Right, it's all on you. Here's a film crew." There was, and I apologize, I can't remember who exactly was with us. It was just a small film crew and somebody, and they said, we've got a couple of ideas. We went to Epcot because there's a British world, and there's all kinds of stuff like that you could film there. And we filmed all the original Blue Blood vignettes there, with the exception of one, the final scene on the final one, which is us getting a shoe shined. And that was done outside the actual CNN, inside the CNN center, right across from where WCW's little studio was, inside the CNN center. And I used to get my shoes cleaned there. And I used to talk, me and the guy that ran that, me and him used to have. From when I went there, because I always wore dress clothes and that. He used to clean my shoes. If anybody finds that I always felt like I'd still get my shoes cleaned at the airport. That's that man's way of making a living.
Right.
And I could clean my own shoes, but that's how he feeds his family. And I've always been taught to give back to people, right? So some people might take that effect. I don't know. People are strange now in the way they think. No, I did that recently. Somebody went, "Oh, you getting your shoes shined?" Yeah, because this fella that's how he makes his living.
Right. Why not?
And otherwise he doesn't get to feed his family today.
Right.
And I don't want to, I can do it, but anyway, I don't know why I'm going off on that. But some people can take things strangely, right? I used to have great conversations with this fella about soul music, because he couldn't believe that an English lad, a 25-year-old English lad, knew as much about soul music as he did.
And you do.
In fact, more.
Right.
Because that was my thing. And he'd go, "How can you?" And we always used to have a nice time together and I'd stand there with him for half an hour afterwards having a conversation, because I used to do a lot of things. Some days in this studio, and it was 10 feet away where the doors were for this little studio at the bottom of the CNN Center. It's where we used to do all the market specific promos for WCW. And I've done as many as 60 in a day. That's another reason when we talk about talking. Once I got to it, right, we're coming to me. I had either Tony Schiavone or Mean Gene. Right. Sometimes there was other people, Lee Marshall and different people. But the majority was Tony and Mean Gene. Once Mean Gene came on board, and we'd do whatever, because when you could talk, they wanted you to talk. So we're coming to Alabama and we're doing, because it was all localized TV.
Right.
Oh, we're doing this, or we're doing that, and I'd just be there all day doing them on a Wednesdays. So I used to, but we filmed the very last thing with me and Bobby there. Most of it was in Disney, and that's how the Blue Bloods started.
Well, let me ask you about the timeline real quick, because
it's
you probably filmed this the same day. I mean, the Disney tapings in that era was crazy, because you guys did just so many episodes in a short time. It started
when I was a TV champion once. I did 13 shows in 4 days. 13 shows which was all the shows. It was 13 shows taped in 4 days. I did 13 of them. And every single one of them was a 10-minute or 15-minute draw.
Wow.
And if I was on with Terry Taylor, great. If I was on with Arn Anderson, Brad Armstrong, Bobby, whoever it was, great. But I was used to be. It got to a point where it was like after day 2, I'd be like, like, just what next? Like, how am I going to get? This is a little thing that I maybe never get to say again. I have a certain skill set that I had to learn to become an international heavyweight, to travel outside of England, which is to be able to put people in and out of moves and make them look like they can do things they can't do.
Right.
People see bits of that now. What is now termed the straitjacket hold. Well, it's putting it on and then putting it on myself, and people not having to. You had to have long wrestling, and not just. I mean, that was just one long. Go say if I went to India, 8 5-minute round wrestling match with a Kushti wrestler who was doing pro wrestling, who he knew how to do Kushti wrestling and throw me and do, but I had to make them look like they could wrestle for 8 5-minute rounds when they're used to wrestling.
And that gave you the skill set
in a sandpit so I had a skill set. I'd exhausted. I did so much TV. This is one of those things that, like a comedian, if you go on TV and tell all your best jokes,
you're out.
You have to keep some stuff back. But I was having to wrestle when I had different matches with Ricky Steamboat and Arn, because we just reacted to each other. But if I had to work with a lot of, we've talked about this before, it was the start of the wrestling school people from the early 90s, or the bodybuilders who
a lot of big people who can clothesline.
Right. Well, doing a 10-minute row, I made them look like they could do things that they couldn't.
Right.
At the end of 90, there was a point near the end of 1994, and I forget exactly when, but it was, it was in the autumn maybe. I came out the back of the Coliseum in Charlotte, which was a very smart wrestling place before wrestling places were smart. They'd seen everything because of Crockett Promotions. They'd seen a lot of great wrestling, and I would always. We've talked about this market research with autographs. There was somebody asked me for my autograph, and I said certainly, and they went, "Oh, we really like you," and I was like, it was like somebody sticking a knife through my heart. I was always polite to people, but I still kept the character up. And I was always looking down my nose at people. I would just go, "Oh, sir," and I'd be polite, but I kept the character up.
But they're not supposed to like you.
I lived that role, right? I lived that Lord Stephen role when I was out in public. I always had, the blazer on and the tie, and I just, and why is that? I said, why is that? As I'm signing their autograph.
Right.
They said, "Oh, we've figured it out." Because when these fellas, and they mentioned certain people, I won't embarrass them, but when they wrestle anybody else, all they can do is clotheslines. But when they wrestle you, they can do all these really cool wrestling moves.
Wow.
And I thought, the gig's up.
Yeah.
I've got to change. There's another thing is knowing, luckily they stopped me before that. I've had people, we talked about that, where I got took out of my singles run and put into the Blue Bloods with H. There was times in WWE when I was commissioner or whatever role I was doing, right, it's time to get out of that now before it runs its course. Every single time it's been a good thing for me, because anything that I've done, if I've wanted to, I could go back to revisit it or bits of it, and nothing ever overstayed its course.
Right.
And that was one time with me, which was this particular time I'm telling you about, because I went, oh, and I didn't say anything, but it really bothered me.
Right.
And so I went to a lot more striking and attacking instead of doing if I was on with Arn, Terry, Brad Armstrong, Brian Pillman, all these people who didn't matter, because they just went with whatever. We react off each other.
They also gave back.
Yes, and they were great at what they did. We just basically we would never talk about anything. Maybe a finish it, just go and outsell each other. That was a term. Just go and outsell each other. We didn't have to say that. That's what we did. Just go out and outsell each other and call. That was the way I was.
Go out and outsell each other.
Outsell each other.
Oh,
that's
amazing, right? That's amazing.
Right. Just you sell for me and I sell for you, and then it works.
It's so giving. That's such a giving philosophy.
Yeah. Well, you sell for me, I sell for you, and then it usually works, right?
Right.
And that's it. That was the way it was. I can't ever. There's one match, which with an infamous match of mine, is the only time in that whole period until, in fact, all my career, that I ever actually laid out move for move a match with somebody. Right. I would never ever just go out and just maybe a couple of ideas, but it was just because we come from a different time where you had to learn how to just react, and it didn't matter what came on, you just reacted to. So that's a different, and it's just different world now. I'm not one of those, back in my day it was better. No, it's just different now, and it's just different, right? So that was the one time that I changed a lot of what I did. Right. And I started, if you watch from the 94 onwards, I was already doing knees and stuff, but I went to a lot of the knees which nobody was doing in not the way I was doing them, the vicious knees, and I was doing the palm strikes and stuff that people weren't doing. That was the one thing of mine that never caught on. A lot of people took a lot of the stuff that I used to do, and I know people might get up their own backside and say I was doing. No, you want to go and watch, go back and sit through all that stuff and see anybody doing any of that stuff before those. And that's I don't want. I hate to sound like I was doing that. I was doing those vicious knee strikes and what they call them, Muay Thai knee strikes.
Right.
before people were doing them on definitely in America. I know, because it was, I was getting ideas from different people, but I was doing different stuff then.
Well,
I started doing more of a striking style then. I'd always done the uppercuts, but I went to more vicious because they'd figured out my tricks. I told them all my best jokes. They'd figured out that I was putting people in and out of stuff, unless I was on with the right people who I could do that to, and they reacted like they were actually doing it. If I'm trying not to give too much away here, but if you've got some, I don't want
someone not as capable or
not as capable, and they've got to look at. I put myself in something, and they've got to look on their face like, "How did I end up here?
What do I do now?
What do I do now?" Yeah, they got no. So I'd basically expose. I'd expose my old bag of tricks, right? Or a lot of them. Well, so I had to go to more of a striking style, and then pick my spots, and that's something else that you want to, I'm not going to lay it all out for you. You got to listen and think about this. Maybe if you're on TV every week, don't give away your stuff. To think of different stuff, or don't. If you've got signature things, don't be missing them straight away. Wait for the right moment. Just because you've done it twice on TV doesn't mean people have seen it. There's not, because every week somebody new is watching, doesn't mean you're over. It takes a long time to get into people's subconscious.
Right.
And you've got to keep doing your thing. So don't be missing them. It's just because you've done it one week and then missing it the next. Because is something, and you used to have to think like this. I used to tell people this, whether it works or not now, I don't know, but it's certainly something to think about when you're only getting to a lot of it. Basically everything you do nowadays, whether it's TV or not, is somebody's filming it. If you start, always hit your signature stuff on TV. You can miss it on live events, but don't miss it on because you're giving it away. Once I've seen you miss it once or twice, then it's
that's it. That's the trick.
Surely, if you've got to put yourself in the mindset of a professional fighter who has instincts. If you want to try to make this really work, surely you would know that if you're a wrestler, somebody who's no, not surely you should know, but this is how you should try to think. Surely that person, if they know they're going to wrestle you, would have been watching what you do. And if they've seen you miss something, surely they know how to avoid your moves. So if you can set it up where they don't see it coming and you can hit them with a signature thing, you can get away with that for a long time before you've got to expose it.
Right.
Or have anybody miss it. Everybody's too quick nowadays to want to give the stuff away.
They're so apt for the counters and the reversals and the clever little instead of really hammering home that this is an effective thing that I do.
Get your stuff over first. Get it to where people are. Oh well, I've been on TV. I've done it 3 times on TV. I don't care. You need to do it for a year and a half on TV. I know it's got it, and I don't. This is where the old wrestler thing. Sometimes I can sound like this. I'm trying to help you here. I'm not trying to moan at you like a lot of these fellas do who do these podcasts and stuff. I'm trying to help you. Get your stuff over before you start. Don't be throwing it away. Make sure people, because you think that not everybody watches TV every week. Doesn't matter what the figures are. It takes years to get your stuff over. Nowadays, you're expected to get it over really quickly, but it takes a long time. Don't be trying to give your stuff away before you've got it over, or give yourself away before you've got yourself over. Right? Don't be walking through the curtains after 2 weeks and there's that, oh, I'm over, and everybody knows. No, they don't. Because maybe that's the first time they've tuned in.
You got to keep working for it.
Right? I know all these things. I'm finding that out from the little bit of whatever I look at on Twitter because of this show. People say, oh yeah, I haven't listened to it yet. I'm saving it up for this road trip I'm doing in 4 months.
Right.
I've read that recently.
Yeah.
All right. So they're interested in the show, but they haven't got, because who's got time to watch everything every week now? Right. Nobody. Because where'd you start? When I was a kid, there was 3 channels on. In fact, when I was born, there was only 2, but I can't remember. When I can remember TV, there was 3 channels. right? You still listen to as we called it in them days, the wireless, the radio.
Right.
You didn't have all these things. Where do you start now? So if you think that everybody knows who you are because you've been on TV for even a year now, more fool you, right? Or you think that Twitter is the thing, right?
Right.
What's the actual the percentage of Twitter? I could be wrong here, but this is something I think is about right. I think it's about 20% of Americans actually have Twitter, and it's like, I know there's going to be people get on and go, oh, no,
Right.
no,
But a smaller percentage of that are actually actively
uh,
engaged. So it's a
actually
small,
engaged. It's like
right.
2%. Is it
right.
80% of them only look at it twice a month?
Yeah. Right.
But
right.
you live and die by the I'm over because I'm on Twitter. Okay, here's something for you. I'm just trying to help you youngsters to make these things that I'm saying settle into you about how important it is to constantly keep up in your game or keep on stuff. I asked somebody recently, I said, you're on AW Dark a lot. He said, yeah. I said, let me try to put this into perspective for you about how you need to this is a great thing that you're on there because you've got reps and it's something. Never look at it as it's great. Any exposure is great.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, but don't buy into the Twitter thing too much. Why do you care too much? Worry about you've got the producers or the people who are paying you or older wrestlers or your peers of the same group. Find out from them. Don't be worrying what people on Twitter are saying too much. And they're like, oh, because they live in a different world. I said, okay, when you're on Dark, can you? And I asked him, I said, can you look up what the figures were for Dark last week? They said, oh, it was 200 and something thousand. I said, do you get 200,000 tweets? He went, no, it was about 20. Right. I said, do I need to say it anymore? Right. And you're worrying about what people like.
Right.
But you want to, you're all up your own backs. You need, if you're in this job, you've got to, I'm going to offend people here because there's a lot of people make a lot of livings off writing about this job. But you need to be worrying about getting yourself over and listening to people who can actually help you. Not the people who are knocking you, but the people, and I'm one of them, who will actually help you. Worry about getting the right things over, not worrying about what somebody who you've never met or is okay. This will offend a lot of people who write about wrestling. I've been injured a lot in my life. They make a living off my back. I have not received $1 single in all my time in America of anybody who makes a living off my back in wrestling.
Right.
Never felt, not one time as anybody, and they make a living off me. I have never received $1 come through the door when I was off for a year once. And my hospital bills, just paying 20% of it, was $300,000.
Oh my goodness.
Just paying 20% of the year that I was off work with my heart problem. I don't remember any of them sending me any money.
Not a dollar, huh?
Right. So put that into perspective. And if they want to write bad about me, I don't care because I don't read what you write about me. It doesn't matter to me. Right. I'm not of your world.
Well,
right. I've told you what I read one thing in wrestling, and that's just to find out who's working where in the world. Right. I've never read a review of anybody about what I do because I ask the people that know who are better than me or know who I work or I'm working for. Is that okay? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Right. That's another way to maybe get yourself on. I get that you want to use that as a tool to promote yourself, but don't read into it too much or read into the fact that everybody knows everything. Right?
Absolutely. And Mr. Regal, this is as good a time as any to take a little break and tell all the listeners out there about Chili Sleep. Because
love my Chili Sleep. I love it. 66 Absolutely. Last night.
66 degrees. How many hours?
I was having to knock. The penguin next to me, he was like going, turn it up a bit. Turn it. Whoa, he
Well,
was chattering, he was, the little fella.
well, science as well as penguins tell us that the best way to achieve and maintain consistent deep sleep is by lowering core body temperature. Temperature controlled sleep repairs muscles after a hard day's work and improves cognitive function, so you can always start your day feeling sharp and alert. Chili Sleep makes customizable, climate controlled sleep solutions that help you improve your entire well being. Chili Sleep makes the Uller and Cube sleep systems hydro powered, temperature controlled mattress toppers that fit over your existing mattress to provide your ideal sleep temperature. Now, Mr. Regal, you have the Uller system, is that correct?
I do, yes.
And you, like you said, 6 degrees. About how many hours
Love
did
it.
you sleep last night? You slept pretty good last night?
Um, I would say I had a good 8 hours,
Phew,
which is for me
that's
incredible
amazing.
because I never
Yeah.
slept for many, many years. I had a major sleep low. And it definitely helps. Being cool. I notice what I notice is when I go away every week because the beds in the hotels don't have it, and I've got that used to it. Yeah, because I've had it for so many months now. It makes a world of difference. Yeah.
Well, these luxury mattress pads keep your bed, as you say, at the perfect temperature for you for your deep sleep, whether you sleep hot or you sleep cold. These sleep systems are designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and give you the confidence and energy to power through your day. Imagine waking up and not feeling tired. Chili Sleep can help make that happen. For an extra layer of comfort, they also make the Chili Blanket, the only weighted blanket that can be paired with a control unit for the ultimate sweat-free sleep. Head over to chilisleep.com/regal to learn more and save 30% off the purchase of any new Cube or Uller sleep system. This offer is available exclusively for Gentleman Villain with William Regal listeners and only for a limited time. That's Chili, CHILI, sleep.com/regal to take advantage of our exclusive discount and wake up refreshed every day. Now, Mr. Regal, the reason I brought up the taping schedule for for WCW at the time is because you mentioned the vignettes, but as far as the viewers saw, the first thing that they saw was you and Bobby Eaton, who is someone who you would not have to have trouble in a match with. You're in a match, you stop the match in the middle of the match, and you propose. You're like, man, maybe you and I should form a tag team, which Eaton
Yes.
accepted. And
So
yeah, go ahead.
these were all done after the vignette, I
I
believe,
was wondering,
after the
yeah,
vignettes,
yeah, I was wondering that.
because everything was sort of um, filmed previously. Yes, it started off with Bobby, me talking to Mean Gene, and it may have been Tony. I was doing promos where I was looking for a new tag partner. Bobby kept coming up asking to be my partner. I kept insulting him and blowing him off and just going, "No, you can't be. Why on earth would I be
Right,
with
right.
such a wretched urchin
It's
as
My
you?"
Fair Lady.
Yes, it's my fair lady.
Right.
No interest whatsoever. Hopefully, that's the great thing about this. People go out there and
Find it.
there's these lovely people and find them and put them out there, and then we can throw them about a bit, and you can actually see these things. And thank you to all those people. It's wonderful that they do that
It's
stuff.
really happening a lot, like with our show
Yeah,
last week,
yeah.
which, by the way, I was a little surprised. I guess I shouldn't be to see we got more feedback on our show. You know, it was supposed to be about Fit Finley, but it became more about kind of the history of British wrestling in the 80s and then Fit Finley.
Mm,
More feedback about that show than any other episode we ever have. Our fans overseas, in England, were crazy about it, and the ones in America, like myself, had learned about it. So make sure anything Mr. Regal talks about, go ahead and look it up. And I know you like seeing some of this old stuff when it comes around Twitter, Mr. Regal.
yes, I love it. Anyway, so Bobby was coming up to me, and then it eventually like we'll have a match, and if you can beat, and me not thinking it would last, and if you can beat me, um, we can be a team, thinking that he couldn't, and then he comes out there and knocks me from breakfast time to night time, right?
Right.
And it it plays out very well, and I scatter out the ring, and oh, you make a wonderful partner. I do a complete 180 and complete coward, and it plays out very nice. I can't really do it justice unless you see it. And then that's when the vignette started of us trying to make Bobby from which he was a gentleman from Huntsville, Alabama,
Yes, sir.
into a. I mean, it was, and when you look back, it's so ridiculous. But it was the
ludicrous.
'90s;
Yeah.
nobody knew any
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Making him into
A gentleman.
a gentleman and doing all these vignettes and the vignettes they're a bit of the time, a bit hokey,
Right.
but people like him and
Fun.
I like him because I get to see Bobby and I miss him.
I have a question about Bobby
Yeah.
Eaton. A fan like myself who grew up watching Bobby Eaton, we know why Bobby's so great. But as you, Mr. Regal, someone who is a scout and developed talent, could you describe maybe what you see now or what you saw then if you were describing to somebody what made Bobby so special inside the ring?
Ability, timing, precise, precision, uh, just just an incredible pro, and it's hard to it's not hard to explain. It was just as good as it got. As far as in ring, he was as good as it got, and it was. I'd watched him on. This is some of the first. We've said this before, but I didn't see American wrestling until 2 years after I was already a wrestler.
Right, right.
And the first stuff that I saw was from the NWA in Charlotte. So I was watching the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express, and so I already knew all about Bobby Eaton, and I continued to see stuff of his. Didn't matter where he went because in the early '90s they started showing WCW on TV in late night in England, and if I was coming home from a show, well, I'm not sure if I was taping it then. If I was taping it, was on let's just say a VCR that hadn't come through the front door of a shop.
Right. Just happened.
Yeah, because I had
you
a
never
quite
know. These things happen.
There was
sometimes.
nothing in my house in Blackpool that had ever come through the front door of a shop.
Right.
So, and but I used to see it sometimes because I was just getting it. It used to be perfect actually because it was just as I was getting in from shows at like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, wherever I'd been in Britain, it was on at 2. I think it was at 2 o'clock. So I'd either tape it or I'd watch it. I'd sit up and watch it, and so I knew enough about Bobby and Britain, but it was just brilliant, an absolutely brilliant partner. We had great chemistry from the second we did anything together. And he had this like. I know his other partners, and I know Jim Cornette can tell you far better than I can about how he had these little things that he could do. But he's just, I ended up with a little system with it. We didn't have to communicate verbally. It was just, I've heard these things that he did with his other partners, with Dennis and with Stan, where he would little clicks and ticks, and I'm not exactly sure what that was, but with me and him, it was we would. In fact, we never worked anything out. It just worked. It was just we were on the same page, and we couldn't have. I couldn't have found anybody better. I couldn't have found anybody better to be around and to travel with. That for the next few years, I was traveling with Bobby, Arn Anderson, and Ric Flair.
Right.
There's a lot of podcasts. I mean, we were just we had a blast with all that. So it was. We had this. He had this just ability. There's these people that are just natural talents at this, and from what I gather, he was like that from being a teenager. And I've heard Terry Gordy was the same, and that. Well, I wasn't. I had to work really. you know, and I was around the best people, and so I was just fortunate to come that, you know, to come along and be, you know, there's no, whatever it is, me and Bobby ended up together, and believe me, it's an old saying, but the pleasure was all mine, and it was just a joy to be around him. It was a joy. He was the one person. Wrestling's always been, there's always stuff going on in locker rooms and whatever else, and people don't get on, and I
You stay out of it.
I stay out of it. I get on with people who hate each other and whatever else. I'm not of a pack mentality and that, but you'd walk in, if you'd see dressing rooms, you'd see little things going on. He's one of the very few people. Brad Armstrong was the same. They could walk into any dressing room, and doesn't matter what characters were in there, whether there was people who didn't like each other, didn't like, there was an app sometimes, you know, and this was a different day when there was a lot of big nasty men in there sometimes, right? And everybody, didn't matter what was going on, even if there was a little bit of arguments or a little bit of, you know, bit of loudness going on, or a bit of a, everybody stopped, turned, hey Bobby, and he would change the entire, and Brad was the same, change the entire atmosphere and tone of the room.
Right.
Everybody was just happy to see him, and that's a rare quality. And so he was just the best, and I couldn't have had a better partner. And so we had, and like most of my TV, my career is you only see what you see. I know that I was whatever anybody thinks of me, whatever you see on TV, that is the worst part of whatever you've, apart from once I got to probably 20, the best stuff that I did was never on TV. I wasn't a great TV wrestler, although I was, whatever I managed to pull off and whatever you see, I know that sounds like I'm trying to cover up for myself, but there's enough people that have seen me and enough wrestlers that have been on live events with me that know that what I could do on live events. And so you're only seeing the TV version of me, which wasn't as good as the live event version when I had, I don't know, there's not that TV pressure on you. Well, me and Bobby as a team, when we were on live events, we had it off. When I say we had it off, I mean we used to.
You went for it.
We had it off.
Right.
He was perfect at his role. I could get so much heat because of a lot of it was things I could do, but a lot of it was just being British in a time when people weren't as enlightened, and it was easy to get just USA stuff. Whatever it may be, we had it off. All the matches that we had were far better on live events than on TV. We're not under the same time constraints and different things, and just the knowing how to, you know, trying to make sure that TV cameras can pick you up and not working in the round as, and that's an old saying, but working the round usually when you're on live events, because you want everybody to see. So you're going from side to side. Well, on TV, you're really not. You're sort of working at 10 to 2. You try to work, if you're smart, you work at 10 to 2 because there's a hard camera and then cameras at the ring there. So it's a 10 to 2 thing. I didn't stick to that as much in WCW, but WWE, that was what I did. So I know I was never as good as a performer on TV. Me and Bobby on live events, it was, we had, there was, I know there was a lot of times we were put on before intermission because people didn't want to go on after us.
Right.
right? And there was 4 teams at the time, which was Nasty Boys, which we had great chemistry with, Harlem Heat, which we had great chemistry with, Bunkhouse Buck and Dick Slater, who I absolutely adored. Had great chemistry with them. It never quite, again, the TV stuff never did it justice. And so we were the 4 teams that were sort of going after the WCW Tag Team Championships. And for whatever reason, we were the only ones that didn't get them. But I don't look back at that. I look back at it in a business sense and go, that was not this. We were the team that should have had those championships because we were the ones with the most heat. Yeah.
Right.
But for whatever reason, and then that's something else. We didn't need them either.
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds it, but we didn't need them either because we had, we could carry our bit. We didn't need to have that. We could carry our bit without championships. So that was all. That was just an absolute joy.
Well, let's talk about those tag teams a little bit. You mentioned those 4 tag teams. I was giving me the next question. Let's start with the Nasties. The Nasty Boys have been maybe lost a little bit to history about how good they were. Big brawling guys from the AWA.
Big brawling, and you could never.
Man, you knew you were in a fight, right? You knew you were in a fight when you were with them.
You were in a fight, and the Nasty Boys I had a lot of good time. There's another. God, I could have a serious podcast about them. We probably all end up getting locked up in jail for that. But I've been through some. I used to go out with Sags more than I did Knobs, because Knobs, after all, and he'll laugh if he hears this, but there's only so much Knobs you can put up with, right? And after a while, I mean,
he's a loud fella.
Yeah, and whereas me and Sags used to go out a lot, and when I was going out, but in the ring we had. If you're going out there with a mind of trying to be looking for some technical display and a thing of wonders, that's not the match that we had. What we went out there was
hard. Yeah.
Well, no, what the match was to go out there and get people reacting.
Right.
And again, we just outsold each other. We sold for them and they sold for us. And I would put over their stuff, which was the armpit stuff and a lot of facials, right, and a lot of entertaining. And that was the beginning of when people used to say, "Oh, have you heard of what such and such has said in such and such a wrestling thing?" And I go, I couldn't care less. Mm-hmm. Why would I care what that? I listen to these fans when we're in these arenas, and they're going insane and they're laughing, and then we get in real boos. That's what matters to me. And I know that this is working. I don't need people. And I'm coming back and I'm having Arn or Rick or Paul Orndorff or Ricky Sting going, no, Ricky, I think it finished by then. But, the likes of them going, oh, fellas, just what we need. Thank you. That was great. Because that's nice. What I cared about, right, is to get a reaction from a crowd. Not when you sat there trying to dissect everything and thinking you know everything about wrestling. No, wrestling sometimes is about getting reactions, and I'm quite happy to do that. And it's to get people to, believe it or not, I know this is it was about people cheering for somebody and people booing for another group of people, and they used to boo us and they used to cheer them, and cheer them very loudly and boo us very loudly, and not, it's all this whatever's it's become now, and people worrying about that. No, and it is a different day and age and a different audience now, but this is the 90s, and people, if you're trying to analyze that, no, I know that people were booing us a lot and then laughing when I was falling on my backside, and then booing a lot when we started battering the life out of them. because you did used to have to batter the life out of them. That was what, and that, I have to say this about the Nasty Boys. People can say, oh, well, and they didn't look like whatever. You could not, and they would be blowed up sometimes, but they would never stop. I have seen that. I used to just go, come on, because I used to be a machine, right?
Right.
And Bobby was a machine in his own right, although he never made out to be. Bobby could just wrestle all night. And, I would go out there to make people sweat.
Right.
I was always a conditioning thing, and you're going to sweat when you wrestle me.
Right. You're going to keep
right?
going.
You're going to be going. Whether, and it might, sometimes, again, it was all a change at that time. With his satin head, like, yeah, but you don't realize this fella, I'm headlocking him and he's not getting a break. I'm making people sweat and realize that there's a physical contest going on here. And I know I'm getting the reactions that I want out of people, right? Not about what you think or a certain group of you think. I'm going to get the reactions I want, and I know work, because that's what I was taught. And so that was the start of the separation in the way fans, and then eventually in the 2000s and whatever, fans started changing. But this is the mid 1990s, and I was out to get booze. And I got booze, and Bobby got booze, and the Nasty Boys got cheered. I've seen the Nasty Boys in Japan getting just thrown all over by people, right? And you just could not. And they were like purple with just, and you could not stop them. They would not stop coming. They would just constantly be coming and coming and coming, and it didn't matter. So you could never, I could never fault them. I'd always had a good time wrestling them. And sometimes it was, because, and we weren't nailing, there was no like light looking stuff in any of that. Most of the time started by them, because as soon as they hit me hard, I would just smash them straight back. Right. And sometimes I remember once that, and they'll know and they'll laugh at this. They used to do that thing where they do that clobbering time thing in the corner.
Yeah.
Well, I'm watching them doing it to Bobby, and it's bothering me. I think it was one of the first times we wrestled them, and they're just hitting him, and he's not hitting, and it's bothering. So I made sure the next night I ended up in that position.
Got it.
Right. And so they're both and they used to not even look. They would just be like swinging and hitting as hard as they could. And I'm just like this, and I'm just going bang, 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 so just
you're jabbing.
I'm just jabbing them right on the end of the chin. Every time they hit me, I'm just hitting them. And I watched their arms slowly. They were still going, because they're like, and keep going, but their arms were getting slower and slower. And I just went bang, 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 and then I just like got out of it. But just to like let them know, be a bit more careful, fellas. Right. You're not just. And we always got on. I can tell you some. Oh dear me. I put them two both to sleep one night on Thanksgiving night, because I remember it because it's Sag's birthday. We were in a I was on a tour to Japan with them. We were in this small hotel, and we had the top row, and they were all little tiny rooms. Right. There's a lot I can tell you about this tour, but I'm just going to keep it to this particular incident.
Sure.
Because this is one night of a lot of revelry, but it was the 4th is Sags' birthday. 4th of July is Sags' birthday, and we had a night off. There was a lot went on. Eddie Guerrero was there, Art Bar was there, Tuco Scorpio was there. We had a hell of a night. Right. Let's put it that way. We ended up on the roof firing off. The police came because they went sent out for a load of fireworks, and
because it's American Independence Day, but it's Thanksgiving.
The police. Right. There was a lot went on, but what the biggest thing was that it was Sags' birthday, so he decided that it was his rules. And it was a toga party. Well, I didn't even know what a toga. I had seen it on Animal House years ago, but we don't do that anymore. Or we didn't, anyway, right. So I've got these, and again, there were all little rooms on one corridor like that. And so we've just got all the doors open. There are these little tiny beds in Japan with these little actually like rice pillars. So, you know, it wasn't, when you got into the bigger cities, you had bigger rooms with little tiny beds, and we were all big fellas. So we were just going in and out, and then we ended up on the roof letting fireworks on. There was all kinds going on that night. But we were all in sheets. So that was the thing. Like, we're all in this toga. So we ended up. We're going from room to room, and I'm just in this room with the nasty one. Well, Nobs is asleep. No, Sags is asleep. He's just nodded off for a minute because we were. I'm not going to incriminate them. We were a little caning it. We were caning it, right? We were proper having a good time, right? Right. So for some reason, Nobs just decides to jump on me. Right? Bad mistake. Right? So like we're in this little tiny room. There's one little chair there and this bed here. I'm sat here and I'm just talking to Sags and talking to Sags for a minute. He's just like nodded off. Sags is behind me and we're just having a little chat. But for some reason, he just decides to grab me around the neck. It didn't last long. Let's put it this way. I was away quick and I'd like gravitated him, right?
Right. Which
is a front face. And I just put him down very quickly.
Right.
Right. So he's going, ah. As that has happened, Sags has woke up and gone, you're attacking my partner. And he dove at me, and that lasted even less time because as soon as he was coming, I just created proper and had him done. So I'd done them both. And they're laying on top of each other, both out, like done in. I've just put them both to sleep on the bed and left them and just went into the next room as if nothing had happened. But they tell that story a lot better than me because they over exaggerate it. Really, I just knocked them both out in like, well, we just put a submission on them and put them to sleep quickly in like about 15 seconds. But we always had a lot of fun, right? So anyway, let's go on.
So the Nasties are one of those teams, and we're probably going to close out pretty soon and save the Dave Taylor and Jeeves talk for another time because we know Dave Taylor is going to be
believe me, there's more. There's so the more questions you ask, the more stories. I had just with Bobby.
Right.
We haven't, you know, we've had a little thing of how me and Paul got together, Triple H, and why we're so close, and we will be as close as that till the day we die. But it's not like we ever come. Let me just get this out so people understand our relationship. We are very, very close, incredibly close, but we don't talk to each other much. We don't have any, and I'm going to say this on this podcast. He knows that I work for somewhere else now. The reason we get on when I started working at NXT is he knows that I will never say yes if the answer's no, if I think the answer's no. That might tell you a lot of things about me, and there's enough people will tell you that. The reason I have whatever standing I have in the wrestling job is because I am as straight up of a geezer as you can find.
Sure. Right?
We've talked a bit about this before, but me and H don't have great conversations. We don't really, the one thing we do have is music. We get on about Motörhead and stuff, but we just get on. And he can look at me because of the time we spent together, short time in WCW. Well, a year, just over a year, but we spent time learning our craft together.
Mm-hmm.
And me and him can just look at each other from across an arena, and I know what he wants, and I'll take care of it.
Right.
When we worked together, I was the last person. I probably spoke to him less than anybody else in the entire company. He didn't need to speak to me. I sometimes get a one-word text, and I would just take care of whatever. I knew what he meant. Right. That's how we worked together.
Sure.
He knows now that I work somewhere else. He knows I would never talk to, and anybody's. I know it's hard for people to imagine that because everybody's different now. They think it's okay to talk all the time. No, he knows that's the way I am. Right. So we've obviously been in touch in the last several months, just occasional thing. I sent him a happy birthday thing the other day, but he would never ask me about what I'm doing now because he knows that's the why I keep whatever
Right.
standards I have. I am, and I don't ask him. I've got no
Right.
idea what's going on there. I've no idea, because I'm not working there. I don't need to know. It's none of my business. None of my business what other people's business is. So I'm working somewhere else. So that was that bit, and then I got this wonderful bit with Bobby, which we can go on for several. There's a few years of that, of a lot of things that, and stories that involve Rick and on and traveling and all kinds of stuff. So yes, we're just touching the iceberg of this bit, and then there's bringing Dave in and Jeeves and so yes, this is more than again with this is that's the one good thing about this. I didn't know how long this podcast would last.
But now you're
But
learning. It can go on forever.
For a long time, because
Yes,
every
sir.
topic is we barely touch it because I'm giving out whatever these stories, hoping that people are gonna, because this is not about me doing anything of making anything out of this. I want to leave what's left in here, hopefully, because you have to hear all this stuff to take little bits or whatever connects with you. So this wrestling job can keep. It's not about a company. It's about the wrestling can keep going for another 100 years. So young ladies and young fellas who want to get in this can stay in it, because I've had to figure it out and still trying to figure it out. I want to give back as much as people gave to me, and I don't want to sound like I'm some kind of no. I'm doing this is why I'm doing this, but you have to listen to all these things, and hopefully you take little bits on board, right?
Well, I want to ask you one more question to close out.
Okay,
This
3 inches,
episode.
but you can have the lot. Ooh, a bit cheeky there. Just a little bit blue, just for the end of it.
You know,
Right.
the last, just want to touch on something real quick. You talked about the tag teams, but of course, like a lot of organizations, sometimes they would put the belts on, guys who were, seen at the top of the card. And one of the matches you guys had was at Clash of the Champions. Eaton and Regal, the Blue Bloods, got a shot at the WCW World Tag Team Championships against Sting and Lex Luger at the Clash of Champions. What do you remember? Of course, you did not get the victory that time, but
that was from Caesar's Palace, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Right. I wrestled twice that night. That was when I had a bad knee. I needed my knee fixed. I'd hurt my knee in Japan in a match against Chris Benoit. That's out there somewhere. We had like a really long match, about a 30-minute match. And it's one of the only time I've hurt me. No, I did hurt my knee in 2009. 2011. The night before, I had a match with Daniel Bryan, the one when he plays the man's man theme. I did that match on one leg, and Bryan did a masterful job of getting me through that. I've told that story, I think.
Sure.
But I had a match with Chris in Japan, 1995, and there was just a pool of water outside, and I went out the ring and just slipped on the water, and that was the only time all the squats and all the bangings on my knee. That was the only time I had to have a knee operation.
Just a little slip.
Just a slip on some water.
But
that night in Caesar's Palace against Sting and Lex, me and Bobby were on. They hadn't got a dark match. Right now, maybe you want this is one of those things. I love WCW, but sometimes, and I have great fond memories. I love WCW. They did a great thing for me. Anything that messed up in WCW was my fault, except for one match, which it's become infamous. But I've took it on the chin all these years. I'm still waiting for that person who was part of that, not Bill, but the other fella, to own up to this, so we can put all this to bed. But that's a different story. That night they hadn't got a dark match, and Chris was there, and I said, "Oh, let me wrestle Chris, because any chance I got to wrestle Chris, I like wrestling." Right. So not only had I got a torn up knee, and you can see my knees all like strapped up and bezel, I went on with Chris first and did our kind of style of match that we did, that we just, laid into each other and did all our stuff. And then I went on and had that match with later on in the night with, and I remember being a bit, I hope this could end up backfiring on me, but we were in it's Caesar's Palace, right? I mean, what was it, 1995 or something, or six? Yeah. It's Caesar's Palace. And I'm like, what am I doing wrestling at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas? And I'd wrestled in Las Vegas, but this is Caesar's Palace.
Caesar's is quite an opulent little place.
Right. But the actual building out the back where we did the wrestling
Right.
wasn't the best of buildings. It was like a tin, basically a big tin hut.
Right.
wasn't exactly this opulent kind of a thing going on that you're not, certainly not in, like Caesar's Palaces, but the actual where they did the boxing and the wrestling out the back wasn't. Later on we moved to the MGM Grand, but the actual thing wasn't. So I remember that. Yeah, so yeah, and when I say stuff like that, what a charm life I've had. I mean, boxers wrestle at Caesar's Palace. I was in my mid-20s. I was wrestling at Caesar's Palace on with some famous wrestlers. I look at it like that sometimes. Not about me. I wrestled Chris Benoit that night. I wrestled in the same night. I wrestled Lex Luger and I wrestled Sting in the same night in Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and I was 26 or something. It's mental. How did that happened to me? It's wonderful. So yeah, I did, and we had, and as far as I know, we always had great. I always did. I love wrestling Sting. I love wrestling Lex Luger. We always had great chemistry. Again, a lot of that was them reacting. We just reacted off each other.
Sure.
I love. Anytime I got to wrestle Sting or Lex Luger, I always had a blast. And Bobby, and they were everybody loved Bobby. Everybody loved wrestling Bobby. So that was just I don't even. You might have some comments about that. I know we just went out and put on an entertaining match. Again, if somebody wants to say, "Oh, well, it was this or it was that," the crowd were happy. You had good guys and bad guys, and that's really what this job was about at that time. And so we did the jobs. 4 pros doing the jobs, making people scream, making people boo, making people laugh, making people enjoy themselves, a morality play, and did our jobs as pros.
Well, we're going to take one question from Twitter. A lot of shows do a lot of questions from Twitter, but we know on this show, if we take more than one, we're going to be here for a while. So, but this is a
I'll
great
try
question.
I'll try not to.
And also, people are starting to get kind of hip to the fact that there's certain questions that you ask every podcast that they're just not going to get answered here.
No.
This is a different kind of podcast, and this is a different kind of question. From Ted the Hillbilly Heel on Twitter. He said, "Love the show. What did you learn from Bobby Eaton about the business and specifically tag team wrestling that you may not have known before?"
Knowing when I was with Bobby, whatever I knew before, and I'd been in tag teams since I was a teenager. The most thing I learned from Bobby was knowing exactly when to do the right thing at the right time to get the right reaction. I knew that as a singles wrestler by then. I thought I knew that. As far as let me take the back. I've said this, I think, many times on different podcasts. I'm not the best match person as far as finishes go. It either worked or it didn't with me. But somehow I managed to get through a lot of things. If I was on with somebody who was very good at knowing when to do the right thing at the right time, then it was even better. Which is a lot of people, a huge amount of people, and we've mentioned a lot of them on here today. And then 2 that I wrestled a lot in my later WWE career was Chris Jericho and Christian. If I was on with them, I'd just go out and do me, and we'd never talk about anything. But they have a skill set of knowing when to do exactly the right thing at the right time towards the end of the match. It was hitting me. If it was left to me only, it would. if I was on with somebody who knew that, it was always better match. If it was just left to me only, it was hit and miss sometimes. You might not know that, but I wouldn't be as happy with it. And I, I had again Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair, Arn, Bobby. In tag team wrestling, Bobby Eaton, I never had to worry about whether everything was right, because he knew exactly
Mm.
when to. And I just again, we had this chemistry. He knew when it was time to kick it into gear. He knew when it was time to. I'm very good at just doing me, but sometimes that's not, and I can bluff my way through certain situations. He knew exactly when it was the right time to go into the certain moments in the match, and so I learned a lot of that with him. I was always, if you look afterwards, I was always in some. I was in some very good tag teams. Well, although I'd learned a lot from Jody Hamilton, I'd learned a lot of verbally from Arn. It wasn't me and Steve Austin as well. We were put together a lot, and we had an instant chemistry. If you look back, because Brian Pillman got hurt, I was subbing for Brian Pillman a
Right.
lot,
Right.
and I did a lot of matches with Steve. And me and him always talked about, and we still do when we occasionally. We had something special as a tag team. We got put together, which was a very odd couple, but Brian Pillman was and me and him instantly had instant magic as a tag team.
Mm.
He did his completely different thing, and he was 100 miles an hour, and I did my thing, and it just worked. It worked perfectly. But Steve has that great mind for knowing that when to do things at the right time in the end of coming to the end. So that's why we had whatever, and he always used to say, even after he'd been Stone Cold Steve Austin, like, and I go, what are you talking to me for? Like it's just Stone Cold Steve Austin. Yeah, well, that was something. If that we should have had a run of being. I'm thinking, why you've got all this? But it's weird that he used to mention that. He always
I've
felt
heard
there
him
was
say it.
something,
Mm.
because we traveled together a lot, and that was it. That with chemistry, we had a great chemistry. I've also been very fortunate. You hear a lot of these tag teams that don't get on. I've never had a tag partner that I never got on with, which has always been great. But I learned from Bobby a lot of things. Say Jody had taught us a lot. Me and Steve had great chemistry, but it was a short time that we were together. But between the two of us, it worked out. With Bobby, I had constant, as many shows as we were on, and whatever we did, I learned a lot more, and then I carried that over into all the other teams that I was with, which went on to being different people in WWE, and Lance Storm was somebody who was somebody that he's a fantastic person for knowing when to do the right thing at the right time. Very, very smart, and so that's why me and him were a very good tag team. We played like we matched each other perfectly. He can do things that I can't. I and I I'll just say this is true. I'm the more vicious one. When it comes to hitting and kicking people, tag me in, and he knew that,
Right.
and like so I get in, and he does all incredible, and he can come off the top rope, and if I get in the middle rope, I start getting the nosebleed. It's not. But I would always if it came down to what the end, I'd trust Lance's. I wouldn't even. Lance was my so like yeah. I wouldn't even open my mouth. Like his ideas, I know are going to work. So that was the thing that I learned being with Bobby. I also learned that there's a lot of people in wrestling, a lot of egos. There's a lot of um, nonsense. I learned that there's some truly wonderful people, and Bobby Eaton was a wonderful human being.